in order to understand Shevi'i of Parshas VaYeitzei, we have to look at the strange response of Yakov to Lavan's charge, which begins at the beginning of Shevi'i. Lavan answers Yakov and says, Habanot bnotai, the habanim banai, the daughters are mine, the children are mine, v'atzon tzoni, the sheep are mine, v'chol asher ata roeh lihu, everything belongs to me. What is striking about this is not that Lavan says it, but that Yaakov doesn't respond. Nothing, right? Lavan goes on and says, okay, we'll cut a deal. We'll make a brit. We'll make a covenant. Yaakov doesn't say, what are you talking about? We already had this conversation. What do I mean by we had this conversation? We've been through this. For understanding this, you have to go back to Shevi'i. In Shevi'i, when Lavan arrives, chasing Yakov, he says, what did you do? What did you do? You stole my heart, right? You stole my everything, right? You stole my heart from me. Tignovit levavi. You stole my daughters. And that's why he's chasing for love of the devotion of his daughters. How could you take them away? Right? So Yaakov doesn't respond to that. When he responds is when he's accused of stealing Lavan's idols. And Yaakov says, no, right? That and Lavan hits him over the head with that. V'atah halal halachta, right? Ki nichsof nichsafta. Lavan has become a poet. Lavan is a poet. His name is anti-poetry, although that's a poet as well. His name, he's first introduced in the Torah as, his name is Lavan. And the Midrash says, paradoxus is a Greek word, means paradox, it's absurd. And obviously the obvious absurdity of Lavan being Lavan. Why is it a paradox? So many years ago, I had the good fortune to be able to meet and speak with Rabbi Dr. Shaul Lieberman of Tosefta Kipshuta, and I met with him, and there were a number of other people there, but it was a very small, and I thought that he would have a chance to ask him all kinds of questions which I had prepared for him. And the only thing I got to say to him that wasn't involved in, what should I say, is kind of talking about what's going on in the world of yeshivas, since Professor Lieberman was out of the world of yeshivas because he was in the JTS, in this Jewish Theological Seminary, and I was still somewhat in the world of yeshivas, having learned in yeshivas for a while. So he wanted to talk about what was going on. But I did get to ask him, talk about this paradoxus. I mean, obviously, Professor Lieberman was the master of Greek and Jewish Palestine. Its name is, right? One of his important books. So I said, I told him, I said, I have two pshatim in this. When Lavan is first introduced, his name is Lavan. That's the paradox. The paradox is that actually his name was backwards, which is a paradox, because he shouldn't have been called Lavan. He was actually, if you turn the letters around, you're going to get Naval. He was a despicable character. He wasn't pure as a driven snow. He wasn't white. And the other one is just on the level of being Lavan, that he was white. He was a blackguard. His heart was dark. Let's put it that way. In any case, Professor Lieberman told me, no, you're wrong. And I don't remember what he told me was the right answer, but in any case. So Lovin is not so poetic, let's put it that way. But here he has a little bit of poetry. Yakov is amazed by this and responds, there can't be. Search, see if you can find anything. There are no trafim, right? And as it turns out, as we know, Lavan searches, and his daughter Rachel, who had stolen the trafim, his daughter Rachel pulls a Lavan on him. In the same way that Lavan said to Yakov, oh, in our place, we can't give the younger daughter be in marriage before the older daughter. So that's why I couldn't do anything else. And so Rachel says, oh, derech hanashim li, I can't get up, so you'll excuse me. And of course, they're hidden underneath the car. Okay. But at that point, Yaakov says to him, okay, you didn't find them, right? And he says, then Yaakov responds, Ma pishi, ma chatati, ki dalakta acharai. What was my sin? What was my transgression that you ran after me? Yaakov is saying, Yaakov knows now because you stole my thing, or you stole my children. That's what's still happening. The children are gone. The daughters are gone. What do you want from me? He says, I worked honestly for you 20 years. And he describes the detail of the honesty for him, right? And you're accusing me of theft, right? You're accusing me of theft, right? So that ends Shishi. In fact, we know Yakov is an absolute. He says ki b'kol kolchi when he's telling the Leah and Rachel that they has to leave. He says, you know that b'kol kolchi avarti et avichen. I work b'kol kolchi. Yaakov, the Rambam in Mishnah Torah at the end of Hilchot Schirut quotes this pasuk in the following way. He says, the halacha is that the Baal Habayit should not steal the wages of the poor person, right? And they should not withhold them at all. So the poor person, even though he's poor, is adjured, shelo yigzol. In other words, gzela works both ways. He could not pay him, and he could steal the time of the Baal Habayit, and yivatel me'at bekan, and he doesn't work the full hour. He's by the water cooler too much. He has to give the full hour, the full work. And then the Rambam goes on and says an amazing thing. The v'chein chayav. It's not only that you have to give the full hour, but lavod b'chol kolcho. You have to work b'chol kolcho. Sheharei Yakov atzadik omar, with total strength. Yakov atzadik omar ki v'chol kolchi avarti et avichen. He says to Rachel and Leah, ki v'chol kolchi avarti et avichen. I worked for your father b'chol kolchi, right? B'chol kolchi. Lefichach natal sachar af b'olam hazeh shenemar v'yifrot ish ma'od ma'od. That's why you get such reward in B'olam hazeh. But this is the only time that I know of that the Rambam calls Yakov HaTzadik. Why suddenly is he called Yakov HaTzadik? And the answer is that it's not. There are two kinds of halachas here. One is a halacha of stealing. If you're supposed to work for an hour, you have to work for an hour. The other is a halacha that comes out of the notion of tzaddik, of tzedakah. And the Rambam in the Guide for Replex says that there's a difference between chesed, mishpat, and tzedakah. And tzedakah and mishpat are both translated as justice, but the one comes from the law, and the other one comes from the moral virtues. To work, to do things that are as a result that I don't really have to do them, but they come out of being a good person in terms of moral virtues, that is to what it means to do tzedakah, and that is what it means to be a tzaddik. And this is what the Rambam is explaining of Yakov, right? So Yakov certainly is right. We know he's right, but Lavan then comes back in Shevi'i and says, bottom line, now the truth comes out fully and explicitly. Habanot banotai, vabanim banai, vatson soni, v'chol asher tarei. You stole everything from me. It's all mine. The sheep are mine. I own everything. And after this, when he comes explicitly out, we would expect Yaakov to respond in no uncertain manner, right? But he doesn't respond at all, okay? He doesn't respond at all. I can imagine what happened here is, after Lavan said, this, so Yaakov, he was waiting for Yaakov to respond, right? But Yaakov doesn't respond. There must be a silence, at which point Lavan says, okay, we'll cut a deal. We'll make a covenant. We'll make an agreement. Why doesn't Yaakov respond? Okay. In the pasuk in Mishlei, 8 lachashot ve'iladaber. There's a time to be silent and a time to speak. Notice that the silence comes before speaking, and that's why people are correct when they say, think before you talk. Okay, but be it as it may, Yaakov knew that before was a time to speak, but he knows that now is a time to remain silent. You got to know when to hold them and know when to fold them. So Yaakov knows that another pasuk, 2 psukim in Mishlei, the opposite, seeming opposites, and the Gemara in Shabbos asks the question. We're not going to get into what the Gemara explains, but the Gemara in Mishlei in the 25th parak, it says 2 psukim, one right after the other, following the other. So in parak Chavav, the pasuk says, Al tan ksil kivato. Don't answer a fool. Don't answer a fool according to his foolishness. Do not answer a fool according to his foolishness. And the very next pasuk says, Anei ksil kivato. Answer him. Right? So there's a time to answer a fool, and there's a time not to answer a fool. And it's here clearly what Yaakov understands, that Lavan always has to be, in his mind, the winner. He always has to have the last word, and your silence is an admission that he's right. He has to be right. Okay? So it's not that he thinks that anything is going to change, but he will be able to explain what he's doing when he really launches an attack on Yaakov, if Yaakov responds. So Yaakov doesn't respond. Let him say what he says. And this is sometimes the thing to do, to understand whether in life one should respond, or the course of wise action would be not to respond. And now Yaakov is very concerned with the course of wise action, because he's going to have to use the course of wise action to deal with Esav in the next parsha.